They gave him the briefing before he ever reached my level of the station. I heard it through the ventilation stack the way I heard everything in Gray Line Station. Compressed, metallic, and filtered through 17 layers of hull plating and recycled atmosphere. Commander Bechner's voice, thin with the kind of authority that needs to announce itself constantly, running the standard intake for a decommissioned review inspector. Category Omega biological threat organism, compound 6-layer containment. No direct address, no sustained eye contact. No acknowledgement of the filing category as anything other than the filing category. 7 years. I had heard that briefing 14 times. Maintenance rotations. Junior inspectors. A legal standards delegation that stayed 4 minutes, filed nothing, and left with the same brisk step they arrived with. Each time, the same words in the same order. And each time I stopped listening by the third sentence, because the briefing was never about me. It was about the file. The file and I had not been the same thing for a long time. His footsteps were different from the others, slower, not hesitant, deliberate, the way a man places each foot when he is actually watching where it lands. I was sitting against the far wall of my containment chamber with my knees drawn up and my eyes closed when he reached the observation window. I knew he was there by the way the ventilation hum shifted against the porthole glass, a body standing still in front of it rather than moving past. I opened my eyes. He was looking at my face. Not at the threat level readout on the panel to his left, not at the containment seal indicators running amber along the bottom of the window frame. At my face, the way a person looks at another person when they are trying to understand something that the data in front of them has not explained. I held his gaze. I did not move. After a long moment he said, "Good morning." I said nothing. Good morning was what you said to a person. Whatever I was in the Compact's filing system, I had not been a person here for 7 years. He came back the next morning. Good morning. A pause. He left space in the pause the way you leave a seat open at a table, deliberately, in case someone chose to fill it. Then he sat on the other side of the observation window, opened an audit binder and read. Slowly, with the kind of attention that meant he was actually reading rather than scanning. I watched his eyes move across the pages. I watched him press a finger to the margin when something required a second pass. I had not watched anyone read in 7 years. It was a small thing to notice, and I noticed it. On the third morning he looked up and said, "I'll be here 7 days. I'll need something to call you that isn't the filing number. I'm going to leave that open until you decide." I said nothing, but I kept listening to what he said in the silence that followed. On the fourth morning I said, "Vesser." He looked up. "Vesser," he repeated. The syllables correct, the weight on the second one, the way my own people said it. Not Vessar. Not Vessar with the flat front vowel that compact processing officers used when they bothered to use anything other than my case code. Vessar. I had not heard my name pronounced correctly by anyone since before the Ethal sovereignty fell. I could not have told you, that morning, what it cost to hear it said right. I know now. He wrote something in the binder. Then he looked up again and said, "I'm Cale Doran. I want you to know I'm an audit inspector, not a containment officer. There's a difference." "What difference does it make?" I said. He considered the question seriously, the way he considered everything I had watched him consider across 4 mornings. "It means I'm reading your file critically, rather than maintaining it." Commander Nair found him in the service corridor that evening. I heard it through the stack. He had violated the non-address protocol. The Category Omega designation was unambiguous on the intake forms he had signed. Cale said he had reviewed the procedural code, and the non-address protocol applied, as written, to Category Omega threat organisms. His audit was not yet complete. He had not yet determined whether that classification had been correctly applied at intake and correctly maintained since. Until that determination was filed, he would conduct his inspection in accordance with standard review practice, which included direct contact with the subject under review. The commander said that was not how it worked. Cale said, "I have the relevant section open if you'd like to check it." A silence. Nair's footsteps, withdrawing. On the 5th day, Cale arrived carrying 2 items he had requisitioned from the station's unused inventory. A directional light panel on a programmable timer, a chair. He installed the light panel on the interior wall of my containment chamber. He had maintenance access clearance and he used it, and set the timer to a 12-hour cycle. He placed the chair so it faced the porthole. He said nothing about either. He returned to his side of the observation window and opened the binder. I looked at the chair. I had not had a window to face in 7 years. The containment protocol specified flat fluorescent panels and no directional light source. There was nothing in the protocol, as written, about chairs. I sat in it. The light came on slowly, rising the way planetary light rises, graduated and directional, carrying a sense of morning as a specific event in space rather than a number on a clock face. Outside the porthole, a dead moon was completing a slow arc, and I watched it move for the first time as something I was oriented toward rather than something that existed incidentally on the other side of my wall. I was still a person who could be given a direction to face. 7 years in this room, and that had not stopped being true. I did not say this to him, but I held it rather than discarding it, the way you hold something small and intact that you are not ready to examine closely. On the 6th day I told him the Ithal word for the light in the 33rd minute of morning, the specific quality of it, the angle and color, the way it named the exact degree of warmth that preceded full day. He asked what the 32nd minute was called. I told him. We moved through the morning vocabulary of a people who no longer existed in any record except the one under review, and he wrote each word in the audit binder, every syllable, asking when he was uncertain and repeating back until he had it. I did not ask him why he was writing it down. I understood, by then, that he was writing it because it mattered, not to any case record, just because it was real, and because real things deserve to be kept. On the 7th day he presented his findings. I heard the meeting through the ventilation stack, his voice, even and unhurried, carrying nothing I recognized as performance. The subject of the filing had been held under a Category Omega classification for 7 years and 11 weeks without a mandatory sentience review, without a required legal status hearing, without a sovereign status assessment, and without the 48-hour evaluative period the Compact's own procedural code required, before any Category Omega designation could be maintained beyond the first 30 days of custody. These were not opinions. They were documented absences in the station's own records. The classification was procedurally void. It had been void for 6 years, 10 months, and 22 days. Commander Nair said that was not how it worked. Kale said, "The precedent citations are appended if you'd like to review them." The containment door opened 11 minutes later. I stood up. I did not rush. I had spent 7 years moving carefully, calibrating every gesture against what the file said I was, and I was done performing stillness for a document that had been legally void for most of a decade. I walked out at my own pace, which was the pace of a person who had somewhere to be, and when I reached the corridor, I stopped and turned to face him. He was standing with his binder under one arm, expression the same as it had been for 7 days, composed, watchful, and entirely unafraid of me. I said, "How long until the transport?" 8 days. I filed the requisition this morning. He paused. "I'll make sure they position the chair correctly." I looked at him for a moment in the corridor. The station hummed around us the same way it always had, but it sounded different now that I was on this side of the glass, smaller, somehow, and less absolute. "Vesser," I said. "You said it right the first time." He nodded once. "I'll keep saying it right." I believed him. That was the part I had not expected. Not gratitude, which is what people who have been caged are supposed to feel when someone opens the door. Just the clean, quiet fact of a person who had looked at my face before the file and said my name correctly, and had not once, in 7 days, looked away when I looked back. I walked to the end of the corridor and waited for him there. That was enough. After 7 years, that was exactly enough.